So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration keeps a record of every climate or weather event that caused over $1 billion in damages. So we can use that record to compare the last 4 decades with the first 5 years of this decade and see if there's any trends that we can identify. And when you go through the numbers, the trend is very clear. The storms are getting more numerous, more dangerous, and more damaging.
Christmas 1980, a bitterly cold Christmas. New York City offices flooded with calls from people without heat or hot water. Area roads iced up, making holiday traveling treacherous. Outside now, our own weatherman, Storm Field. Storm, how cold is it?
It's easy for you to say, John, I'll tell
Yes.
you. Well, I'll tell you, as far as we know, this is the coldest Christmas ever recorded here in New York City.
So let's start off with the 1980s. There were over 33 of these climate events, which caused over $219 billion in damage. These events also caused 3,017 deaths. The most notable event from this decade would have to be the 1988 North American drought, which on its own caused $54 billion in damage.
It was the worst drought since the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. The drought of 1988 brought barges to a halt along the Mississippi River. And in Ohio, farmers paid Native Americans to do a rain dance.
Now, NOAA has also calculated the averages for each decade. So for the 1980s, that would be an average of $22 billion a year in damages and 307 deaths.
We're in Sylmar, just off Bradley, at the Tahitian Trailer Park, where some 44 mobile homes were lost in just this portion of the park alone. Another 20 just north of here, according to the battalion chief to whom I spoke just moments ago. The residents have been coming in and out to survey the damage, but they were evacuated safely. Is our understanding. They were all awakened by the earthquake and took off running, stood in the yard and watched the firefighters battle the flames.
In the 1990s, there were 57 of these billion-dollar climate events that caused a total of $335 billion in damage. They also caused 3,075 deaths. Now this is quite the jump from the previous decade's 33 climate events, but the number of deaths pretty much stayed the same. Now we'd have to speculate, but this is likely due to improvements in weather modeling systems, weather warning systems that allow us to alert people and give timely warnings as well as accurate warnings so people can get out of the way and get to safety in time.
You're about to see a demonstration of Doppler radar, which has evolved into NEXRAD, an acronym meaning Next Generation Weather Radar.
The most notable event from the 1990s would have to be the 1994 Northridge earthquake, which caused over $23 billion in damage.
I have never ever seen anything like this, obviously, in Los Angeles. So I want you to come with me. Lacey Loeb is a neighbor, and he's going to help us. We're going to get up on the freeway, but I want you to take a look at this. The Santa Monica Freeway at La Cienega, totally down, smashed to the ground. We are told that there are 2 cars that are slammed into the concrete.
Granada Hills near the intersection of Rinaldi and Balboa, and behind me you can see there fire and water.
Just as we reach the front door, we meet Terrence and Victoria Tunson, swimming up to their chins, a young married couple who say they need to find their father stranded at home.
Dad, he's trapped in a house.
Slowly, we reach their street, and it's suddenly clear this neighborhood is packed with people who never left.
Now we can move on to the 2000s, which had 67 of these climate events. These events caused over $621 billion in damage. They also took over 3,102 lives. The most notable event from the 2000s has to be, by far, the Hurricane Katrina landfall in 2005. This storm has held the #1 spot as the most costly weather event for decades now, until very recently, which we'll get to later in the video. But it's been #1 for a reason.
As dawn breaks, Katrina envelops the city.
This is where we saw the highest wind speeds, with sustained winds of 133 miles an hour.
That storm caused over $200 billion in damage and took over 1,800 lives.
Take a look at the Highway 59 Feeder Road Bridge. The water is extremely close to touching the bridge.
Now we can move on to the 2010s, where we saw another major jump in climate events. The 2010s had a total number of 131 of these climate events, which caused almost $1 trillion in damages. These events also, surprisingly, took over 5,200 lives. So it's countering the trend that we saw in the previous decades, where the number of events are increasing, but the deaths weren't increasing. And now we have the number of events increasing and the deaths increasing significantly as well. So you have to ask yourself, what's the difference this time? And again, we're speculating, but I think this might be due to the unpredictable nature of these climate events that we've been experiencing, whether it's extreme flooding or a hurricane strengthening from Category 1 to Category 5 in a matter of days. It's making it hard to give any type of warning to people, even when you can accurately predict where a hurricane is going to hit or where it's going to storm. You don't know the severity or what could happen to make this situation historic, whether it's a hurricane stalling and causing major flooding, or a flash flood coming down from the hills and hitting a small town and sweeping everyone away. These events are very hard to predict and very hard to warn about. So the averages for the 2010s were almost $100 billion per year in damages and over 500 deaths per year. The most notable event from the 2010s lines up with exactly what I was just speculating about, which is Hurricane Harvey, which stalled over the Houston area and dumped endless amounts of rain and flooded the entire region.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Let's get straight to the breaking news. Harvey provoking an unfolding flooding disaster in America's fourth largest city, Houston, Texas.
This is all happening right now as we come on the air, and the situation is unfortunately dire. People trapped in their flooded out homes. They are fleeing to their attics, taking to social media, begging for a rescue.
It was truly an unprecedented event, and that's the type of thing that's hard to predict using weather modeling. You can see that a storm will stall, but you can't really see how severe the flooding would be, how the local communities would handle it. It's very hard to predict that to the tiniest detail to each individual and know if this person is going to be safe or if they should evacuate. It's very difficult and hard to predict. So this time the number of events in the 2010s increased 95% from the previous decade, but the deaths also increased 68%.
I knew my neighborhood was on fire, so I thought, I wonder if my place is still there.
Mel Gibson is one of the many celebrities mourning the loss of his home amid the Los Angeles fires. In a phone interview January 9th on News Nation's Elizabeth Vargas reports, the What Women Want actor reveals that the Malibu home that he lived in for nearly 15 years burned to the ground.
So now we can move on to the current decade, of which we've just completed the first 5 years. So we can use these first 5 years and kind of extrapolate the rest of the decade and see, and compare it to the previous decades. Even though it's not 100% accurate, we can see the trend that we're on. So far in the first 5 years of the 2020s, we've had over 115 of these climate events, which caused over $740 billion in damages. These events also caused over 2,500 deaths. Now that gives us an astonishing average of $149 billion a year in damages and over 500 deaths. Now it gets even scarier if you double these numbers to extrapolate for the rest of the decade. You get totals of 230 climate events and over $1.5 trillion of damage, which is truly breathtaking. Now it shouldn't be any surprise that the most notable event so far from the 2020s would have to be the California wildfires of 2025. These wildfires stole the #1 spot from Hurricane Katrina in 2005 with an estimated damage total over $250 billion. Because if you think about the region that was hit, I mean, you're talking about Los Angeles, mansions and production studios, businesses, expensive land, some of the most expensive land in the world, the most expensive buildings, completely wiped out. Yeah, you can just see from the number of actors and celebrities that were on the news talking about how they lost all their things, all their property. This land is very valuable. So when that fire spread and burned over tens of thousands of acres, it racked up the damage total, and now it's clearly taken the #1 spot.
Today, the Pacific Palisades is still on fire. The frustration, of course, is for firefighters. It's like a giant game of whack-a-mole. You never know where the fire is going to hopscotch. Hours ago, this house was fine, but it caught fire this morning. The entire house was decimated by flames. Dramatic footage shows a cliffside home engulfed in towering flames. It's a total loss.
Small note here, these wildfires actually took place in January of 2025. So they're not included in the original calculation for the first 5 years of the 2020 decade. These wildfires would technically be a part of the year 2025, which is the 6th year in this decade. So this $250 billion total isn't even included in the $746 billion total that we have so far. If we add it to our original total, that means we're already around $1 trillion in damage, just halfway through the decade. Now you have to ask yourself, what's the consequence of all these costly climate events? I know it costs a lot of money, but what's the impact? Is this something that's sustainable? Is this something that we have to, deal with somehow? Is there even anything we can do? Well, you should look into these insurance companies and see how they're reacting. So while doing research on this, I found that AARP actually had a ranking of the most costly climate events. So it seems like they're looking into it, and it's something they're very concerned about, since obviously if they're insuring homes, this is something that could really hurt their bottom line if they're having tens of thousands of homes destroyed in a single event. One thing I noticed in AARP's ranking was that 7 of the top 10 most costly weather events in American history happened in the past 2 decades. 7 out of 10 of these events also took place in relatively the same area, which is states that border the Gulf. So Texas, Louisiana, Florida are common spots for these disastrous storms. So it seems like there's about 4 states that are disproportionately targeted by these events. And I think that pattern will continue going into the future. And those states are California with their wildfires, and Texas, Louisiana, and Florida with their hurricane risk, which, a hurricane comes with wind damage, flooding, power outages. It brings a whole lot of issues that cost a lot of money to, rebuild and replace once the storm is gone. So if anyone should be concerned about this trend, it should be people living in those areas. Now, what are insurance companies actually doing about this? It seems like they're concerned, but what are they doing about this? Well, they are actually taking some actions, and it's not a good thing. According to NBC, in California, the average home insurance premium has reached $1,300, which seems like a lot, and it is a lot compared to other states, except for Florida, which has this home insurance premium average of around $6,000 to $5,000, which is unimaginable. It's extremely expensive, and no other state can really relate to that. Not only are insurance companies charging an insane premium to provide home insurance, they're actually deciding not to provide home insurance at all in these states. For example, over a dozen insurance companies have completely abandoned the Sunshine State of Florida and have decided that it's just not worth the risk to do business there. Now, there are many factors that could go into that. It's things like roofing scams and other things that are going on in the state, but it's hard to ignore the trend of endless storms hitting Florida, causing hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of damage, and then insurance companies refusing to cover the homes. I think it's hard to deny there's likely a correlation there. So this means for residents in these states, especially Florida, home insurance options are very limited, and the few options that are there are extremely expensive. So in conclusion, whether or not you believe climate change is man-made, which there's a lot of evidence for, but it really doesn't matter what we think about climate change, or if we think the climate is changing at all. It really doesn't matter. This trend in costly natural disasters is clear. It is not debatable. It's happening right now, and I don't really know what we can do to prevent it from happening, but we need some type of legislation to protect homes for people so that these areas don't become completely uninhabited. At a certain point, it becomes not feasible for a person to own a home in these areas. If an area is flood prone and I can't get home insurance, why would I own a house in that area? If Florida's getting hit by multiple Category 5 storms every hurricane season, how do I have any sense of security that my home will be still standing in the same spot it was when I bought it? The government or someone has to step in and provide that security if these insurance companies are no longer willing to do so. Now in the future, I think we'll have our first year with over $1 trillion in damage very soon. I'd say probably within the next decade or two. And I think that will be the day that people will start thinking about the economic cost of these climate events. At that point, it'll be hard to ignore. That was a long rant, and that's everything. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like below, subscribe. I'll be doing more investigations or commentaries like this in the future on anything that I find concerning or worthy of a warning or a discussion. So if you're interested in any of that, make sure to subscribe, and thanks for watching.
This is Eyewitness News with John Johnson for Ernie Anastas, Ellen Fleischer for Roseanne Scamardella, Mike Berry with sports, Storm Field with the weather, and the Eyewitness News team.